but perhaps have never met him. Very distinguished fan of Manchester United and delighted that he's given us some of his time tonight. He first saw Man United in 1954. Yes, he is that old. He's been enjoying them ever since, and of course he has many, many books. I think it's 30 plus books, some of them titled Duncan Edwards, of course Eddie Coleman, Liam, Billy Whelan, and of course Dennis Violet, and many, many more. Ladies and gentlemen, delighted to have him this evening with us. Please, as Patrick called him before in his full title, Friend of the Foundation, Roy Cavanagh, MBE, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. First of all, thank you, Alan, for that, and also thank you to Pat Burns and everybody connected with his marvellous MMMF Foundation. Absolutely fantastic what they do, and keep the memory of one of the greatest football teams that ever lived going. A big round of applause for the Manchester United. What I'm going to try and do in my limited time here tonight is to tell you what I remember and thoughts as a young lad at the age of 7 to the age of about 10 or 11, from 1954 to 1958. I was born, bred and still live in Salford, very proud Salfordian, top city. Thank you, my fellow Salfordians, that's really, really good. But in the 50s, Salford was dominated by the docks. And the sight of seeing men every day with their cloth caps on, their collars turned up, their hands up in the day's pay. It never leaves you. I used to pass that docks every morning going to school, and you could see it, and it sticks in your mind. Of course, I lived in a slum, but nobody knew it was a slum because every other house around was the same. But if you walked over Trafford Road Bridge, bringing you towards Old Trafford then wasn't the, because it was very colourless in the mid-50s, I can assure you. Rationing was miles, totally open, and the other end just had the scoreboard with the A to Z of the half-time scores. But of course you saw a green pitch, first sign of real colour, and then you saw the red shirts, and then you saw the opposition shirts. And of course, one guy had a different coloured shirt on. That was the goalkeeper. He'd have a green shirt on. And Ray Wood became my hero. And still, I regard Ray Wood as one of my first heroes, because he was different to the other 10 men with his green shirt on. No sponsorship on the front, no number 1 on the back. But Ray Wood was my first hero. But Manchester United in those 50s, from 54 to 58, won 2 league titles. And I thought I would go through each of the 24 players who played a role in those 2 seasons when they won the first division title. The main side was known as Wood, Fox, Byrne, Coleman, Jones, Edwards, Berry, Whelan, Taylor, Violent, Penn. But that's only because that side hardly lost the game. But there was another 13 players who was needed in that team. And when you look at the present team, that team was all about teamwork. There were some world-class players, but it was about teamwork. I mentioned Ray Wood as my hero, but here comes one of the teamworks that you need in a good side, Billy Foulkes. Now Billy Foulkes, when I stood in the Stretford end paddock, the older guys around me then used to call him Cowboy. He had bandy legs, did Billy. And he very rarely smiled, but not many wingers got past him. And Billy, over his career, of course, won 4 great teams of players who do things like that, just takes the pressure off everyone else. The left back was Roger Byrne, who was the captain and the leader of the side. And Roger Byrne was both of those things. A truly great left back and a truly great leader. And one thing that stands out is that Roger had just played 33 consecutive international backing, or their mate's favourite left back, but no, Roger Byrne was first choice for 33 games on the trot. Eddie Coleman, number 4. Like myself, a Salford lad, lived in Archie Street, which for those of you who ever watched Coronation Street from the start was the actual street that was shown in black and white. That was Archie Street. Eddie lived at number 9. Valerian, Munro, Wiggle, Snake Hips, a magnificent, magnificent character and a magnificent player. I saw his debut at Burnham Park in November 1955. I was 8, went with my dad, and we stood on the big open end of Burnham Park. And what took my attention was this huge pylon alongside me. I just didn't know what it was. I mean, to me it could have been a spaceship. Because don't forget, United didn't get their floodlights for another 16 months. I'd never seen floodlights. And it was just fantastic looking up this bloody big pylon there. But Eddie was a tremendous player. Centre half, Mark Jones, steady as a rock. One of the seasons we won the title, he played in all 42 games. A magnificent footballer. Most of the younger players looked up at Mark. He used to smoke his pipe off the pitch and liked his budgerigars, but he really looked after the younger players. And when I just said to you about Roger Byrne getting 33 caps on the trot, how is it that Mark Jones didn't get 1 for England? Because probably his 8 chairmen were thinking, well, we'll keep going with Billy Riley. He was a good player, but Mark Jones was an exceptional centre half. Then he come to number 6, the incomparable Duncan Edwards, who I wrote the first biography about Duncan back in 1988. Now Duncan, of course, was an absolutely incredible player, but I must stress, what struck me was that team was a team, and he was obviously a giant amongst them. The first time I saw him play was at Old Trafford on a Saturday morning in March 1955 in the FA Youth Cup, 11 o'clock kick-off. Now Duncan was already a first team player, but he played in that youth team, which had Eddie Coleman at 4, Duncan Edwards playing as a centre half, Will McGuinness at 6, Kenny Morgans and Shea Brennan on the wing, and Bobby Charlton up front. Now they were playing Plymouth Argyle youths in the quarter final of the Youth Cup, and they actually won 9-0. Now that wasn't a surprise because we had such a great side. What was a staggering point was that 3 weeks after that game, Duncan Edwards made his England debut against Scotland at Wembley when England won 7-2, playing alongside the likes of Finney and Matthews. So as a boy at 16 having his first team debut, 18 his international debut, and obviously 21 the sadness of Munich, Duncan Edwards' legend status was rolling and rolling, and I find that today it rolls even more every day and every year, and that's a tribute to Duncan Edwards and part of a great, great side. Number 7 was Johnny Berry, and he was a terrific outside right, could beat full-backs, left or right, bit older and a rarity because he actually was a transfer from Birmingham City. Number 8 was Liam Billy Whelan. Now, the Irish, of course, dropped the Will off and call him Williams Liam. All the English call Williams Billy or Bill. And the first thing that Liam Billy Whelan was told when he arrived from Dublin was, whatever you do, keep your name. But of course, every report you see will either be Liam or Billy. But what a graceful player. Inside right, scored 54 goals in 93 matches. A magnificent inside right and a magnificent man. Now, at centre forward, I can assure you, the greatest centre forward in England at the time, and probably as good a centre forward as anywhere in the world, Tommy Taylor. An absolutely magnificent centre forward. If you saw Ronaldo on Wednesday leaping, knocking a ball in like that, Tommy was like that every game. Up he went, just stood still in the air, boom, bang. But he could also play with both feet, a tremendous character as well. And as I say, one of the greatest centre forwards I've ever played football. Alongside him, a Manchester man, Dennis Violet. We also wrote a biography with Brian Hughes, the boxing trainer. And Dennis Violet, one thing just to tell you about Dennis Violet. He scored 32 goals in a league season in 1960. And that is still the record league total by any Manchester United player. Now you think of the forwards that Manchester United have had since 1960, and he scored 32 in that season. Outside left, David Pegg. If he'd have lived till the 1960s, he would have been an advertiser's dream. A good-looking, dark-haired lad and a great left winger who could beat his man, score goals, and he did the rarity. He actually crossed the ball to a teammate. And you go to a game now, and the ball doesn't even get past the first man. Peg down the wing, beat the man, woof, and there's Tommy and others in the box. But as I say, that was the named 11 that rarely got beat. But there was another 13 players because there was injuries, and some of these players were not reserves. They were players who, when they got their chance, they stayed in, particularly like Jackie Blanchard, who I'll come to in a minute. But you had Ian Greaves at full-back, very good on either side. Jeff Bent, a fellow Salford lad who played, and Jeff was probably got in any other side in the country, seriously. But of course you had the maximum wage, and he was playing with his mates, he lived in Salford, so he didn't want to go and play for a London side or a Midland side. At right arm, Jeff Whitefoot was before Eddie, and is still one of the youngest players, if not the youngest player, at 16 years and whatever, to play for Manchester United. Then Freddie Goodwin was Eddie Coleman's understudy, and when you think Freddie Goodwin was a very good cricketer as well, and he was Brian Statham's understudy at the other Old Trafford, you need players like that. You just need players who are reliable. And at centre half was Jackie Blanchard. Now Jackie Blanchard was not a reserve. Jackie Blanchard was in his own right a great player. And I've written a lot of football books about United and cricket books. But I must admit, it intrigues me, Jackie's story, and perhaps that's one that I would love to really write. But I saw him play at 4, 5, 6, 8 and 10 for Manchester United, and he actually played for 80 minutes in goal in the 1957 FA Cup final when Ray Wood was absolutely hammered by Peter McParland and stopped United being the first team of that decade to win the double. Left half, Wilf McGuinness had the very difficult task of understudying Duncan Edwards, but in his own right, Wilf was a very good player, played for England. He once told me a story that his second game for England, Tom Finney, Sir Tom Finney, had really looked after him. And he said, Tom, he said, thanks very much for doing what you've done this last 2 or 3 days. If there's anything I can ever do for you, just give me a ring. And Tom Finney said, what are you doing on Monday? He said, why? And Tom Finney said, well, my labour's off and I've got to fit a bath. But he had a plumbing business at Tom Finney. Well, that was Will McGuinness. Outside right, young Kenny Morgans, who was just broke into the side a month before the crash. Inside right, Johnny Doherty was the first inside right at the Busby Brigade, but he had a bad injury just when before the 56 season, and Batley and Whelan came over from Ireland to replace him. But Johnny Doherty was a magnificent footballer himself, and of course was one of the main instigators of the Manchester United Former Players Association, which is great to see them represented so well tonight. Then Bobby Charlton. Now I saw Bobby's debut against Charlton Athletic here when he scored 2 goals. I also saw him in the 56 FA Youth Cup final when they played Chesterfield here. And Bobby was at number 9, and in goal for Chesterfield that day was a young 16-year-old lad called Gordon Banks. 10 years on, Gordon Banks and Bobby Charlton would help England win the World Cup. Alec Dawson, the Black Prince, filled in on the occasions Tommy wasn't around, and another forward, Colin Webster, Welsh international, was also playing across the forward line. And finally we come to Albert Scanlon, who was a Manchester lad, but all us Salfordians took to Albert as one of our own, loved him to bits. And the same as David Pegg, a great crosser of the ball, and found his own teammate, which is very unusual, but could score goals. Those were the players that were at the Busby Babes, and every single one of them made those 2 championship sides. And let's have a big round of applause for all of them. 2 or 3 games, and Matt and Jimmy decided to make some changes, and one of the changes was to bring a new goalkeeper in, and they brought Harry Gregg in from Doncaster Rovers. Now Harry was already a legend when he arrived here for a world record fee for a goalkeeper, and I saw Harry's second game for United, which was on Christmas Day 1957. Now, believe it or not, for some of you who don't realise it, but Christmas Day used to be a regular game of football, and that was the last ever Christmas Day game in England, was December the 25th, 1957. Harry was an outstanding personality, a magnificent goalkeeper, and of course he also became a legend for other reasons, a legend on and off the pitch, and a special round of applause to Harry Gregg, one of the greats. In late January 1958, I came to the Ipswich Town Cup tie here. My dad was only 10. Ipswich Town were managed by Alf Ramsey, and he had Roy Bailey in goal, the father of Gary Bailey. United won the game 2-0, thanks to 2 goals from Bobby Charlton. The real sadness is that 5 players would never play again on Old Trafford pitch. Roger Byrne, Eddie Coleman, Mark Jones, Duncan Edwards and Tommy Taylor. And the week after, 1st of February 1958, I can remember coming to the reserves here against Wolves, top of the table match. There was 19,000 on here to watch the reserves play. When I tell you the reserve side, I had Ray Wood in goal, Ronnie Cole, Jeff Bent, Freddie Goodwin, Jackie Blanchard, another Salford lad, 18-year-old Harold Bratt, Johnny Berry, Billy Whelan, Alec Dawson, Colin Webster and David Peck. That's not a reserve side, that would have been most First Division side. And I remember it was cold and misty and foggy and the rain was coming in, but 19,000 to watch the reserves. The following Wednesday, of course, United qualified in Belgrade for the 2nd European Cup semi-final. And I can remember to this day where I was in the afternoon of the 6th of February 1958. I was asked to stay behind from school, not to get a caning, which I did occasionally, but to learn some more maths and English in the hope that I would pass me 11 plus, which I didn't, I failed. And I was coming home, dragging my bag behind me, meeting my mates outside from the newsagents, and there was a big billboard, you can see it now, about 4:30 English time, United in plane crash. And at 6 o'clock, Kendall came on the television and announced that many, many fatalities. Following morning at school, the headmaster told us all about it. And in the school desk, I had lots of souvenirs and pictures. And on my way home for my dinner, I grabbed them all. And I can remember to this day, knocking on number 9 Archer Street. Someone answered the door, and I handed them all over that I had about Eddie Coleman, because I was going back down Oxall Lane. Ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't watch United till the following September. I was devastated. I was only 10. I still remember that. I still remember that team. They, for me, were my life then, and they've been most of my life since. Manchester United, the greatest team ever, and the Busby Bears, the biggest part of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, what about that? Roy Cavanagh, MBE, ladies and gentlemen, absolutely marvellous.